And we're back. Now, this time we're going to be discussing the older tracing options in the live trace panel in Adobe Illustrator. It's not so long ago that this was used. It was literally maybe like 2 versions ago, which if you know Adobe, they come out with a new version every like year and a half. So this was something that is actually more familiar. People are more familiar with this than they are with the newer image trace option. When you would open your panel options, essentially like the image trace options in the last video, you have a bunch of presets, and those can be found under your mode box. And they tell you presets like black and white. And actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. Under the mode options, these are your color modes. So you have grayscale, black and white, and you have color. Under your preset options, this is where you can actually change to presets such as high fidelity photo, low fidelity photo, black and white logo, things of that nature. There are a bunch of preset options. But right now you see this is the custom option. So when you click that panel to bring up your tracing options, this is what you will see. Okay? And then you can select your color mode. Again, that's color, grayscale, black and white. If it's in black and white, similar to how the image trace option worked, you can select the threshold, which is going to govern whether or not something is converted to black versus white. Like, what is that borderline it has to be at where it's considered white or black? Okay? Your palette, essentially in this, when you have your color option selected, in your palette, when you are working with a specific color mode, if you've opened even a color library, you can select that color library, and what it will do is it will make sure that it only picks certain colors that are within that library. So if you're working in a Pantone match system, you can make sure that the colors that are within that library are the only colors that this image trace option or the live trace option is actually using, because you may not want colors to be picked that are outside of that actual library, because then you're going to have some complications when it comes time to print, or when you send things off, they're not going to be able to match it correctly. Okay, so that's one reason for the palette. You know, the max color option, pretty self-explanatory. It allows you to select how many colors you want maximum in your piece. You can do that with just about anything. You can take this number down to 1. You can take it up to 100, and you can just change the number and fool around with it. Now, other options are output swatches. If you were to click this option, anything that it resamples in the image and any colors that it gets, it will actually add to your swatch library so that you can keep those colors themselves as separate pieces. In the blur option, let's say you import an image and the image is kind of pixelated, but you want to soften the edges around those pixelated edges or those jagged edges. The blurring option allows you to select a blur radius, so that way it blurs it a certain amount to smooth those edges. And the resample will allow you to resample the image at a set resolution. Okay, so that's where it will resample it from. Now if you were to go into trace settings, that's where you get essentially the same options you saw where we were in the bottom of our image trace option box. So you can trace according to fills or according to strokes or to both. And then you could set the maximum weight and length of the stroke that it is to recognize before it's actually converted between either a fill or a stroke. The path fitting also governs how closely it's going to fit within that path of the actual tracing option. When you look at the minimum area, this is essentially telling you the minimum area that's going to be considered traceable before your image actually converts it to, you know, like a fill or a stroke. Now when it's doing that, the lower the number, the longer it's actually going to take for it to render. But the benefit of that is the closer it's actually going to look to the original image. So it's good to lower it, but keep in mind that it's going to increase the tracing time, as you may have seen in the image trace options in our previous video, which I had to cut some of those out because they can be lengthy. The corner angle itself is going to govern when it decides it's going to transfer a line that's curved to a straight line. So it basically gives it a point where it computes whether this specific curve is either too short or too long to be either a straight line or a curved line. either or. So it's going to figure out which one of those options it's going to pick from, and that's in your quarter angle. The last option is the ignore white, which we've explained in the previous option. Is it takes any of the area that is selected as white, primarily in black and white options, and then it deletes that area. It doesn't necessarily delete it, but it brings it up as a blank no fill or no stroke area. You can always change the color and everything, but it shows through the background of the image. Okay, and then your view allows you to select whether or not you want to see the tracing result and whether or not you want to see the raster result. And that's essentially what it is. And then you can select to take your preview on or off, and then click trace to get your options set. And once you've done that, you then again click to expand, and then you're able to expand and select different parts of your image for specific strokes or fills that have changed it to, and then you can repurpose those for different colors, etc., etc. So essentially it works identical to the image trace option. It looks very different, but it almost works exactly the same way. So if you need to, you can fool around with these option boxes in your version of Illustrator, whichever version you have. It could be CS4 or 5. You can have CS6 or CC, and use those options and fool around with them, play around with them, get familiar with how the actual look is going to change accordingly, and then figure out what suits you best for what you're actually using it for. So stay tuned. Going to have some more videos coming soon, and I look forward to seeing you guys there.